Welcome, everyone. My name is Craig Gardner, and I have Jill Goff on the line also to help run the meeting. Today's topic is security and roles management in WATnet Express. We have, I don't know, about 25 people online, so please remain muted. We'll have a Q&A at the end of the presentation, at which time we will read questions that come in on chat, and we'll call on people who indicate in chat that they have a question. With that, let's get started. Before we get in to the meat of the presentation, I want to remind everyone this is for WATnet Express. Basic does not include security access control functionality, so what we're talking about today does not apply to Basic. There are features that are not available in WATnet Basic, and they are grayed out in a manner similar to what you'll see today as far as what's grayed out through the Express security controls. So if there's any question as to, hey, someone must have disabled something through security, if it's in Basic, it's just because it's not a feature that's available in Basic. What we're going to cover today is, what is WATnet security and what do those features do? And of course, how to set up WATnet security. We're going to talk about how WATnet security is focused on creating groups, assigning security, access at the group level, and then adding users and assigning them to groups to give them that appropriate access. So what is WATnet security? In a nutshell, it's basically how to control access to WATnet features and pages and screens through the management of groups and users, as I stated. The security rights are tied to the group level. So it's not like you, for every person, have to set up what they can and can't do. You will create a collection of groups, and you will assign rights to those groups, and then you'll add users to the groups for the level of access you want them to have. So I've got a graphic here where you've got the overarching administrator who has access to all features in WATnet, and then you may have groups that have a shrinking level of access to what they can do. For example, here, administrator can do everything. Group 1 may be able to do everything an administrator can do except get to the security features. And then maybe Group 2 can do everything Group 1 can do except edit data view pages or data views. And then Group 3 might do everything that Group 2 can do except maybe, modify or delete any kind of custom test meter test sequences. So you might have, this kind of arrangement of security access in your group management, or it may be something looking more like this, where your groups of people are more unique in their responsibilities, and there's just a little bit of overlap. That's ultimately going to be up to you and how you decide to manage, the people at your organization. And like I said before, once you define these groups, what access they have, it's at the user level where you say, okay, you belong to this group, this is what you can do. So that's a little bit about what the security does at high level, creating restricted access based on a group level. Let's talk now about how to get that set up. The first thing is, of course, to turn it on, at which point the administrator who should be doing it, and at that time they will add themselves as a user in the security settings. You will set up some high-level security options, and at this level it's more just to control what a user is greeted with when they log into WATnet. When they launch WATnet, how do they get in? Next, we'll go into creating the groups because, I'm going to say it over and over. Groups are where you decide what the security rights are. It's at that level. So you'll create groups with kind of that in mind for yourself. this is how I want things arranged. So you'll create those groups, and then you'll go into each of those groups and define what rights they will have. And it's only at the end that you create your list of users and assign them to those groups that you've created. So to turn it on, and again, this should be whoever's going to act as administrator, should be the one setting this up. You will go to the admin section of WATnet Express. You will click on security settings, and then at the bottom, security options. It's kind of at the bottom because it's the thing you're going to do the least. You'll probably set it up and never touch it again. So to turn it on, there's a big checkbox that says security enabled. It's pretty much the on or off button for this feature. The other choices, which we'll get to in a second, basically are going to control what the users will see when they launch WATnet. And as you're just turning the security feature on, you're going to be greeted with a pop-up window that says, hey, it's a good idea right now to set up at least one user with administrator rights. And it's recommended to go ahead and do that. And when you hit yes, you're going to be greeted with a wizard for user creation. The wizard for setting up the admin at the beginning is the same wizard you'll use for every user later on. So the wizard that launches basically has a welcome screen to tell you, hey, you launched a wizard. The next screen is where you enter the details for the user you're creating. At this point, we're creating an administrator. So in my example, I've got admin and then my first and last name. There's a couple fields here called default owner and default location. Those aren't really used in Express. That's more for WATnet Plus and Limited. The next screen, of course, is where you would type in your password. And later on, when you're adding users, it would be a good idea for the admin is the only one who can add a user. But it would be good for the user that you're creating to be present to type in the password they want. We don't have Express, there's no temporary password. Go and change your password at the user level. So for that to be set up for a user, that should be done by them while you're doing user creation for that person. The next screen, there's a drop-down box for what group to assign that user. When you're just turning on the feature, the only group that's going to exist is the administrator group, which just has to exist. And so that's the only one there at this time. But later, when you add groups, those will be populated in that drop-down when you create future users. So you'll just click the drop-down, pick the group you want them to belong to, and move on from there. The next screen of the wizard is basically a summary of what you entered, and then a screen to basically say that the user is created successfully. So now that you've created your administrator, you can go back to the security options screen and decide those high-level options that will decide how someone logs in when they launch WATnet. If you don't click anything else, a user, or even the admin, will be greeted with the login window as you see in the top right of the screen. They'll use the username and password that's been defined when they were created as a user. There's another option that we're going to talk about today, and that's that middle one that says automatically log in using Windows username. What that will do is query Windows for login credentials. If you choose that, that login window will not appear when you log in because it's just querying Windows and says, hey, this person logged in successfully to Windows, they're good to go for WATnet, and there's no login screen that appears. However, as the note applies, that username has to exist in the user list in WATnet. To even go further with that caution, the admin who's setting this up, they should really have a username that's for their Windows login that matches the user they've created for themselves in WATnet, or else you could get yourself in an embarrassing situation where no one can get into WATnet. So make sure that at least one person as an admin has a username that matches their Windows credentials if you decide to use that automatic login feature. Okay, so after you've turned it on, it's time to set up your groups. So if you haven't already, by the time you get to this point in setting up security, it would be good to kind of plan out or have an idea in your mind of what different levels of access you want to have and give them kind of a name in your head so you know what you want to do from this point forward, because it's you'll see in a minute, it's probably not something you just want to click around and improvise. Kind of have an idea of what groups you want and what access they should have. And when you click on the edit groups and security rights, there's a larger screen, but I've just shown a little snippet of it to the right where all of your existing groups are listed. And when you first start, the only one that's there is administrators. And to add more, you would just click add group, give a group a name, and keep on doing that until you've covered all the groups you want to create, and they'll appear on this list. Once you've created a list of groups that you want in your security layout, you will then start the process of defining what security rights those groups will have. By default, the administrators have access to everything, and by default, all the new groups you create have access to nothing. It's a ground up building of access. It's not a whittle down. This is kind of, because to show you the whole screen, the font would be minuscule and you wouldn't be able to read it. I've kind of split up the screenshot here just so it's readable. But while you're in the same screen where you defined your groups are on the right, and on the left is the tree of screens and access levels that you will be turning on or off for the relative groups. And below the group list, there's basically a summary of what you're doing. So like right now, equipment is highlighted. And so it says equipment, and you've also got the group meter techs highlighted. So it says meter tech group, I'm on object equipment, I'm going to either allow access or turn it off. And this tree seems short, but it expands quite a bit. And so while it may seem a little daunting or tedious once you start getting into it, there's a logic to it, which I'm going to show in the next few slides. But once you kind of get a sense for what you're doing, it's not so intimidating. So the top level of the tree basically corresponds to the main menus in your WattNet main panel. So home, equipment, etc. This is where, if you have, like, for example here, meter tech selected, object equipment, you would basically decide whether this button is clickable or grayed out. And you make that decision for all of these menu sections. And at the next level, diving into equipment again, the tree where you're defining your security rights will expand to cover all of the links that are on the equipment screen in WattNet. So you would have a choice when you select these in the security rights screen. You basically click on each of these and we'll have decisions on whether people can see this and then what they can do on the screen on the other side of that link. And so here you've got basically the end screen level of security right decision. The first option, allow access, basically corresponds to if they can even click on site information, for example, whether they can click save or add, or if those are grayed out, and whether they can click the delete button. So it's through these different levels that you get to decide for each group at this screen on there right now, what each group has access to see, what each group has access to do, whether they can get to a screen and what they can do once they're on the screen. So here's an important note. When we, at Radian are like joining you for a WebEx or some remote support, keep in mind that we'll be limited by what that user has access to. As far as I know, there's no magic, make me admin that we can do over a WebEx. We're remoted in, sharing control of a user's computer. There's no way for us to supersede that. So it would be a good idea if you're going to use the security feature to either have an admin available when you need a remote support from Radian, or maybe temporarily turn it off during a WebEx support session, and then turn it back on when whatever issue has been resolved is resolved. Okay, so we've been through, turning it on, setting how people log in, creating groups, and creating, what rights those groups have. The next step is to create, the list of users. You may, account for everyone in your organization, or you may just account for the people that will be using, Express, and that's it. Straightforward, the add button adds a user. It will launch the same wizard that I showed earlier, where it'll ask you for username, first and last name, what group do they belong to, and then that will start populating this list. There is a delete button, but because there's the opportunity to link users to test records, for example, it would be a good idea to never delete anyone from the user list. Instead, there is a column here called lock account. The lock account feature, that allows you to disable anyone from logging in using those credentials or acting as that user, but any existing data tied to any records or reports will not be at risk. So, lock, don't delete. If someone ever forgets their password, I did an experiment where I tried 4 times to do it wrong, and it won't lock you out, but they can't get in either. So at that point in time, an admin would have to come in to this user list, and then you can highlight a user, have the user present, click change password, and they can enter a new password if that contingency arises. There's also a column here for employee ID. One reason you might do that is if you have a larger organization where you have, or it can happen in a small organization, have similarities in names or initials, where you decide, linking this to a record, I've got 3 Johns, I've got 3 people with the same first and last, initial. I'd rather go with, a number system. So you can enter an employee ID here and manage and link things, through that, as opposed to using a username or names, initials when you're linking these to records. Okay. So with that, I'd like to actually dive in and show you what it looks like in, I've just been showing you screenshots and slides for now, but this is what it looks like when you launch Express when you don't have that auto login presented. So I'm going to show you admin stuff, so I'm going to log in using the admin account I created. And like I showed, to get to the security settings, it's admin, security settings. And at this level, it's where you can control how you log in. You can control the groups and security rights. So you click on your different groups to edit and drill down into the different screens to control access. So you want your team leads to be able to do everything there on potential transformers. You would turn all of that on, make sure to save it. And I'll show the wizard on how to, add a user. So we've got my made up list of names here, and I want to add a new user. So you just click add, click next. Let's make up a person. Jim Stiles is new to the company. He's got a password that he's typing in for himself. Of course, this is where I'm going to mess it up. And I would choose, let's say Jim came on as a meter tech. So I would choose the meter tech level of access. Summary, no problems creating Jim Styles as a user, and we're done. And I'll give him, following my same pattern, I'll give him a new employee ID and click save. So it's really more straightforward than some of it may look. And that's as easy as it is. And let's see. Back to my. Okay, so at this time, I'd like to open it up to questions. If you would, please use the chat feature of WebEx to let us know what your question is, or say, I have a question in chat, and then we can unmute you and call on you to ask a question out loud. So let us know if you have any questions. Sorry, my typing, I'm typing my cohort to see if any chats went straight to her. We'll give it another 15 seconds or so to see if any other questions come up or any questions come up. I'm assuming that means I did a good job. I hope that's what that means. No questions. All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending. If you think of any questions after the fact, please, email technical support at technicalsupport@radianresearch.com or call us at 765-449-5576. You can also visit our website at www.radianresearch.com for more information on our products and et cetera. We enjoy being your solutions partner, and we look forward to working with you. I hope you have a great day, and we hope to see you at the next presentation. Thank you very much.